Listen, can you really trust a landlord? Think about it. They're real estate investors. They've got like slick back hair. They drink Pellegrino. Everyone hates that stuff. They look loaded all the time. And there's this inherent distrust between tenants and landlords. Today, we're going to talk about the issue between both landlords and tenants. And here's the big question. Can you really trust a landlord? Well, I'm going to tell you most of the time, you can't.
One shot, now the future is yours. Go!
Man, if you've ever been to a real estate conference, you've got these real estate investors, and the successful ones are driving their Lambos. They're looking fly and hot. They've got all of their gold chains, and they're basically trying to outwardly communicate, I've got all of this crazy success. And you know what? It kind of breeds this notion that landlords are maybe not very trustworthy because they got in the business to basically make money, and yet landlording is kind of a people business, right? It's like, I bought the house, but I'm putting a family or a tenant in that home. And I'm going to tell you right now, there is massive inherent distrust between landlords and tenants, and for good reason. The landlord-tenant relationship can be a tricky one to manage. Both parties have incentives to be dishonest in different ways, leading to low trust between them. Dishonest tenants are dishonest to landlords, and landlords are dishonest to tenants? Yeah, let's actually dive in on this one. Now, some of these landlords that get a bad rap are sometimes called slumlords. You kind of know what I'm talking about here, right? They have untimely responses for work orders. You're the tenant, you're calling them up, and they're basically dragging their feet. They've deferred maintenance on broken windows, peeling paint, and you're basically saying, when are you going to fix that doorknob, that doornail, or whatever it is? And then there's very little respect between the tenants and their privacy. So what this does is this paints landlords in a bad light, and not for bad reasons. But can I also tell you that I have definitely been screwed over by the tenant on more than a handful of occasions, over 100 times, and here are some of the stats why. 26% kept pets when it was against the lease, and by the way, that costs money to the landlord when there's a transition. 25% broke the lease in some way, but never told you about it. 22% did not disclose broken items to the landlord, they just hoped to kind of get away with it. And 20% sublet a room against the lease agreement to subsidize their rent. These are just some of the reasons why we have this great tension between landlords and tenants. And I gotta tell you that if you want to become a multimillionaire in the game of real estate, you have to find a way to bridge the gap and create a solution, and I've got the perfect one for you. This is gonna seem really weird, but what if there was a far more lucrative strategy of being a landlord than just renting out a place or leasing a place? What if I told you you could make more than twice as much money as just doing a typical rental, and yet at the same time clean up all the disparity and all the issues between landlords and tenants? If you could make millions of dollars doing that and being a greater service in the community, would you want to know about it? Well, we're talking about stewardship versus ownership. 37% of tenants said that they would take better care of the house than the landlord if they actually own the property. And it begs the question, how can landlords responsibly give tenants a sense of ownership in the property? And it turns out that there's a way to do this. This is a very tiny niche. This is something most people don't know about, but it is how I became financially free in 4.5 years. It's a very, very powerful strategy. Psst. I've got a free copy of my book in the link below that I'll send you that will reveal this entire strategy. I've used it to create so many millionaires, and you might be next. So what I'm specifically talking about are these signs you see on occasion called rent to own. Rent to own or a lease option contract give tenants the legal right to purchase the home after a certain number of years. This arrangement solves all of the trust issues in the landlord-tenant relationship. And I'll tell you, the very first property that I bought that I wasn't gonna live in, I started getting advice from some of my investor buddies, and one of them said, Kris, we own 6 of these lease options, these rent-to-owns. And I was like, why? And they basically said, we make way more money than a typical rental, and then all of a sudden we get rid of the maintenance and the issues, people are way happier, and I'm like, wait a second. You found a way to solve all of the landlord-tenant issues while making a whole lot more money and everybody's happy? I just had to try it out for myself. And when I did my very first one, it was crazy. Let me tell you a story about the very first investment property that I ever owned. My wife and I had already bought our first property. We bought it below market. We were renting out the basement. We were basically living for free. And we went to the bank and said, bank, we've got some equity in this home, 40 grand. And the bank said, well, we'll give you a home equity line of credit for 20 grand. So we basically took 2 weeks, did the paperwork, and then I got this credit card with $20,000 on it. And my wife's like, what should we do with this? And I'm like, I think we should buy another house. She was nervous because we hadn't actually bought a house that we didn't live in yet. And so when we bought it, we used the home equity line of credit as a down payment for the property. And something very, very cool happened. We posted this rent to own sign in the yard. And because it was on a busier road, I started getting phone calls like crazy, and people were texting me and they were calling me, and I said, shoot, how about we all just meet up on Saturday? And I had all of these people come over, and when they did, I said, hey, I'm not doing a straight rental on this house. Check it out. If you like it, come talk with me in 10 minutes. There was a couple of families that came back and they're like, we want this house. How does this rent to own thing work? And I basically said, well, instead of paying a typical rent, you're gonna pay me a little bit more above market rent by a few $100. You're also gonna give me a small down payment, either $3,000, $5,000, or $7,000. And then what I'll do is I'll work with you over the next 2 years until you can buy this house. And some of the money you pay me every month, I'll apply it towards lowering the purchase price so that when you go to buy it, you have some equity on this property. And that very day, I had a family that said, Kris, here's a $3,000 down payment. Here's our payment of $1,600 a month. My mortgage, by the way, was like $1,000 a month. So I was collecting $1,600 a month from them on top of the non-refundable $3,000. My payment was only $1,000. So I was basically keeping $600 a month. And then they said, well, it's our house. We're going to buy it in a couple years. We'll do all the maintenance. We'll take care of it. You don't have to do anything. Later on, when I sold that house, I made over $100,000. I became a raving fan of this thing called a lease option. I ended up writing a book about it. I've given 50,000 copies of this book away for free, trying to help everyone else figure out how do you start from nothing and become a multimillionaire? Well, this book has the answers, and in the link below, I'll show you how to get it for free. Success often comes to those that get into a deep niche where no one else is participating. And let me tell you right now, see a need, fill a need. Right now, the strategy that I used all those years ago is working today better than ever. Why? The US housing market is short 6.5 million homes. That number continues to grow, and you can help fill that gap in home ownership by offering lease option contracts to people who want to buy but can't afford a down payment with these interest rates in today's market. But I'm telling you, in today's market with today's interest rates, it's very easy to find a great deal, use this system that I teach in my book right here, and basically provide that home to somebody else. And trust me when I tell you, you're gonna make on average more than twice as much money over 5 years than if you just rented out the property. Now, if you wanna see the math of that, if you wanna understand the profitability, if you wanna understand the 5 ways of making money, if you wanna understand step-by-step how to do it, and if you wanna know how a kid starting with no credit and no money did this whole thing, you can do the exact same thing. Click the link below. You are gonna cover the shipping and handling. The book itself is free. I will ship it out to you, and I'll even have a member of my team contact you and just say, hey, can I help you get started and show you how to start implementing this and give you some free coaching? If you like that, click the link below. Let's start your journey to wealth right now. Recently, I made a video about the secret politics of real estate and how you make the most money. And if you click the link right here, let me show you that video because it's going to give you some of the most interesting and fascinating insights on what allows an investor to become super profitable.